Hello, Angel here. Welcome to the channel. In this video, we'll be discussing Vardun, the newest mage from the 5th generation. As you can see, you can now test out the newest pair in the Abyss for yourselves. Everything's maxed out here. Champions, artifacts, and even pets, so there's nothing left to do but test. So, head on over to Abyss, and see for yourself what this pair is capable of. Of course, we'll be discussing this character in the traditional way. Anyone who's in the Season of Disputes can read it. However, we have a lot of new players who don't have access to them yet, so we'll be discussing these skills for them as well, so they know what awaits them in the future. In this video, you'll also learn what this pair is capable of at a low build. Reports will follow. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. If you appreciate this content more, you can become a supporter of this channel, for which I thank you in advance. And now, on to the first skill. There's a lot of text, so when I can, I'll shorten this text to get the gist of the skill. The ability to rage, the Chaos rune, is very important. Remember this name, it consumes the current rune. Depending on the rune, the Legion casts. We have 3 attacks here. The first attack is Thunder. It deals magic damage to the selected Legion. Damage factor 2000. The second rune is Fire. It deals scattered magic damage to the selected Legion and 2 nearby enemy legions. Damage factor 1600. And the third rune, Quake, deals scattered magic damage to 3 enemy legions in a rectangular area in front of it. Damage factor 1800. The legion gains a random rune upon starting the battle and a rune matching the target's unit type after using the rage ability. So, depending on the target being attacked, we can gain a rune. Yes, and here's a breakdown of these runes. Attacking cavalry, we can gain a rune of Thunder or Shock. Attacking infantry, we can gain a rune of Thunder or Fire. And attacking archers or mages, we can gain a rune of Fire or Shock. When attacking multiple unit types, we'll gain a rune depending on which unit type is most numerous, for example, in a bastion. And when attacking a PvE legion, we gain a rune randomly. So, skill number 1 is really interesting. The damage is quite high. Let's move on to skill number 2. And skill number 2 is misunderstood by many, but we'll discuss it in a moment. When a legion in the field gains a rune through the rage ability, it becomes a destructive rune. This effect can be activated once every 30 seconds. When consumed, the destructive rune ignites enemy legions, dealing scattered damage. It also slows enemy legions that take damage. March speed minus 30% for 3 seconds. Remember that applying a slow also debuffs, which is very, very important when it comes to a pair of Cantaman Wardens, especially the 4th skill. As for the second skill, in simple terms, we're using our frenzy twice. So, if we use, for example, the Quake rune and we have the Devastating rune, we're also using the Fire rune at the same time, so we're essentially dealing double damage. This means we're applying double debuffs, which, as I said, is very important when it comes to Cantaman, because we can really quickly max out our defense penetration, which is a really cool bonus. Yes, a cool bonus. The second skill is also a double cast of the Frenzy skill. The difference is that we'll always use the Fire rune here. Let's move on to skill number 3. Legion magic units gain 20% magic defense and 20% magic attack. So, cool skills. 40% is quite a lot. This will probably be the new standard. We probably don't need to explain this. As for skill number 4 Tear, it goes like this. When using a Chaos rune, i.e., when using our Frenzy, infantry units of the selected legion lose 40% of their defense, cavalry units lose 40% of their health, and archer units deal 40% less damage than their normal attack. And magic units deal 20% less damage than hero abilities. The effect lasts for 10 seconds. So you could say it's a permanent ability, since it takes about 10 seconds to accumulate 1000 frenzy points to nullify the frenzy ability. We have a truly powerful dose of debuffs here, and there's no denying that this hero will certainly make a mark, thanks to this ability, among other things, in open field battles or even rally battles. Let's move on to skill number 5, Awakening. The Legion deals 20% more damage than the hero's Frenzy ability. In the field, Legion has a 100% chance of gaining a destructive rune upon the start of battle. Why is this Awakening so crucial? Here's a one-on-one test report. Mutej vs Yun Ming with Vardun. Everything is awakened here, as you can see. This is what the artifacts look like. Level 5 of Sanctus. Here we have level 4 of these bracers. We have sand lizards on both sides. As for Warden, his awakening, we always receive a rune upon entering combat, right? This marker is from receiving a rune. And when we're awakened, we immediately gain a destructive rune. This means the first time Warden rages, Wardrun goes berserk. As for damage, here we already have the damage accumulated from the double cast of the ability. Here, however, we have a regular rage. And below that, we also have a destructive rune. And we applied a -30% slow. Here, we already have that 30% debuff applied. And then there's the Chaos rune and the Devastating rune. As I said, the damage is cumulative. It's not individual. Awakening is also nothing more than a double use of our frenzy from the first frenzy. So it's a really powerful ability, partly because we can stack a lot of stacks on this ability, allowing us to hit enemies even harder, because we'll be ignoring almost 50% of their defense. Of course, Cantaman has more defense penetration, but I'm talking about the fourth ability. Regarding the talent tree, I think a good talent tree is, of course, a skill tree and a PvP tree. That's how it would look here. If we're playing Cantaman as a replacement, 8% additional damage is a really good result. Here, of course, we're taking 10% additional damage from hero skills. In the PvP skill tree, we increase our hero skill damage and increase our damage delta by up to 3%. I also like to take an additional 5% from normal attacks. However, if you don't want to play a skill tree with a PvP skill tree, you can play the standard skill tree and half the magic tree. This talent is really cool because we also ignore an additional 10% of enemy defense. Admittedly, the effect only occurs once every 30 seconds, but with all the ignoring of enemy defense, ignoring an additional 10% even once every 30 seconds, I think it can do the trick. So, you have a choice between these two tremors, which I think are the best. And remember, Warden should be the captain. Here's a small correction regarding the Cantaman skill tree I mentioned in the video. They've fixed it now, but the first day I recorded this video, Cantaman had a garrison tree here, and then a skill tree. They've fixed that now, so you can't create a skill tree for Cantaman, but like I said, Warden should be first. Warden should be the captain because we'll apply a lot of debuffs when Warden goes berserk, allowing Cantaman to ignore more enemy defenses, thus dealing even more damage. Speaking of pairs, I definitely recommend playing Warden with Cantaman. However, if for some reason you don't want to create a Cantaman for Warden, the reason might be very simple. Yes, Warden must be awakened, of course. You can try to create a Cantaman with 51-55, but you'll unlock the full potential of this march when you also awaken Cantaman. Especially since then we'll get even more damage from Cantaman's awakening. Remember that Warden deals a lot of damage, but it's spread damage, meaning the more legions you hit, the less damage it will take. Awakening Cantaman, on the other hand, will reduce this spread damage reduction to some extent. So if anyone's wondering if they're worth building, of course they are. But as I said in the introduction, you can test them out in the Abyss. I know this investment is quite expensive, yes, because both need to be awakened, and mages also receive the gift of the legendary Saluna, who also does some work on the battlefield. And to awaken them all, you'd need about 2,100 tokens, so it's a significant expense. However, in the long run, it's definitely worth building them all, because, you know, Velen will slowly become obsolete. I think Lilia might be a similar story, although Lilia also has her own dedicated artifact, which makes her somewhat playable. However, let's say you only want to build Warden, don't have Cantaman, and don't want to build him, then you can really give Warden anyone. And all of that should work. As for the artifact, the Bracers of Doom are truly brilliant. Not only do they deal damage, but they also knock enemies back and stun them slightly for 1 second. As you can see, the description doesn't state that this effect can be activated once every certain amount of time. So, with 5 such artifacts, if you used it approximately 1 second apart, of course, with 5 people with bracers, you could keep such an enemy at bay. and that enemy shouldn't approach. It's a brilliant artifact against infantry and cavalry, but it's also effective against archers and mages when you try to catch up. Bracers are better than the crown because, as for the crown, it says here that the silence can be activated once every 10 seconds for a given legion, so we can't chain it. As for the bracers of doom, well, the artifact's description, at least, suggests we can swap it, so we can cast one artifact after another. And this effect should work on the same legion. So, playing bracers wisely can really make a difference. Of course, let's not forget about the additional effect, which is when we gain a rune, and our warden doesn't have to be awakened. We gain the rune upon entering combat. Even if our warden has 11-11-1, we gain an additional attack for 15 seconds. And as you know, when we go berserk, we also gain a rune. We go berserk on average about every 10 seconds, so this 25% plus magic attack is even permanent. The synergy between this artifact and warden is truly wonderful. As for the pet, we have Magifox at our disposal. I can't tell you yet whether it's any good. However, if you don't have Magifox or are just starting to build it, you can use a Sand Lizard as standard, or you can use a Sapphire or Seraph Dragon. Now let's move on to the reports. Here's a low build of heroes from Roy. As you can see, the heroes aren't yet level 60. Cantaman 5223, Warden 5111, and level 2 of the bracelets. Maybe we shouldn't comment on Magifox. I think a Sand Lizard could have easily been added there. And here's a screenshot of what such a low build looks like with awakened heroes. Everything is awakened except for Talea, which is level 5551, I suspect. So even the low build is close to Bertrand of Tandalin. However, if we were to add the legendary Saluna here, I think this report would be very similar to Yun Ming with Talea. So let's compare this report more closely to Lily with Tohar. So the low build might be a bit off. I think if we had level 60 here and a better pet, we could maybe get to 24,000 or 25,000 merits, so even with a low build, you can get some merits. However, when we have everything awakened, as I said, we also have a pet, obviously from testing, that has all skills at level 3, so you know, it's a bit of a mess, because who would afford a pet with all 3-star skills? A maxed out half pile, on the other hand, makes quite an impression, similar to an artifact. Here's Zabisk's report, of course, so keep that in mind. But for comparison, we also have Yun Ming with Gromera. Gromera is awakened. Yun Ming is 5335, so he's still a bit short. And we have a level 5 artifact. We have a pretty decent Sand Lizard. And the difference when we have everything maxed out, I think, is quite significant. So, you see, they can do their thing. However, keep in mind that Moon probably played 4 Sand Lizards and 1 Magifox, so this legion could probably have some healing from Sand Lizards, which obviously helped him a lot. Because then Magifox can deal damage, and the legion itself gets some healing, but I still think it looks really solid in terms of merit. Here's a rally report at the end. Of course, the swarm was there, but let's see what other pets were there. It's a really cool rally pet. I think it's the best pet for rallying, increasing our damage by quite a bit. As for the Bastion fight itself, well, the critically wounded ones came out on top, right? As always, death when you attack will be a disadvantage, so that's obviously the norm. However, remember that this legion was swarmed, so it probably couldn't have really gotten going. Regardless, it looks really promising, and once you have control of the open field, I think this march could be the answer to the infantry garrison. Let's take a quick look at the buffs and debuffs to see what it looks like. Unfortunately, the Kuman still has an additional 170% hydrogen phosphide. However, we've reduced his defense a bit. If we also had an ability that removes buffs from the enemy legion, in this case, the garrison, the Kuman, this report would be much, much better. So, as for the question of whether it's worth doing, of course it is. However, keep in mind that everything here needs to be awakened for it to work well together. And of course, in conclusion, I recommend you test this legion again for yourself to see what it can do. Remember that instead of Magifox, you can give it another pet, like a Sand Lizard, to see how it works with a Sand Lizard or any other pet you have in mind. I'll be saying goodbye to you in this video. You know what to do. Take care. LO.